June 6, 1944. The date appears like a scar across the century. A whisper carried through the beaches of Normandy, through shattered helmets and damp letters, never sent home. It is a date that often begins the story of America's fierce surge into the heart of World War II. But the truth, buried beneath familiar photographs and patriotic speeches, stretches far deeper than one invasion. It begins in dimly lit rooms months earlier, in secret classrooms, on snow-covered training grounds, in psychological laboratories where men were remade into soldiers of a new kind. The world remembers the bold invasions, but few know the silent evolution behind them. How the American forces adapted faster than any other Allied army, reshaping warfare at a speed that stunned enemies and even uneasy allies. It wasn't merely weapons or numbers that fueled their rise, but a restless spirit of experimentation, a willingness to break traditions that had held European armies in rigid frames for generations. Behind closed doors, away from reporters, and the comforting glow of propaganda, the United States was rewriting the very manual of war in the winter of 1941. Before America had even fully awakened to the war, military psychologists were conducting strange tests. Volunteers were deprived of sleep for 72 hours, navigated obstacle courses blindfolded, were subjected to interrogations by officers pretending to be German intelligence. The Army wanted to identify not just strong men, but adaptable minds, those who could improvise under chaos, those who could think when orders became useless. The British had hierarchy. The Soviets had resilience. But America sought something else: rapid transformation. New recruits arrived from farms, factories, jazz halls, universities. They spoke different dialects, worshipped differently, often disagreed even about the purpose of the war, yet they were thrown into melting pots, where identity dissolved into something fluid, ready to reshape with every theater they entered. Officers documented how quickly these men absorbed new tactics compared to traditional. European soldiers trained within narrow doctrines. A private who once fixed tractors in Kansas under fire could repair a tank engine in the rain-soaked fields of France with nothing but scavenged parts. A Brooklyn dockworker, never trained formally, learned to decode German supply patterns by reading captured ledgers like financial records. Adaptation became instinct, born not from discipline alone, but from the diverse chaos of American society itself. Stories that never reached newspapers speak of the secret camps hidden in North Carolina and Virginia, mock German villages built in forests, complete with signboards in Gothic script, propaganda posters, even actors speaking fluent Bavarian. Soldiers patrolled these eerie replicas, learning to infiltrate environments that felt uncomfortably real. At night, instructors would change the village layout, move alleyways, board up windows. The men would wake to find themselves lost in what should have been familiar terrain. The lesson was simple: war rearranges the world when you're not looking. Adapt or die. This concept would later haunt German officers who believed the Americans were clumsy, inexperienced, too industrial to think creatively. Yet reports from the Eastern Front reached Berlin, describing Americans improvising artillery using destroyed enemy guns, rewiring them on the battlefield, firing shells the Germans believed unusable. A captured German colonel confessed with bewilderment. "They fight like engineers," he meant it as criticism. But it became an accidental compliment. American warfare was not elegant, but ruthlessly inventive. Few know of Operation Plowshare, not the later nuclear experiment, but the 1942 covert intelligence effort that tasked American botanists, geologists, and archaeologists to study European terrain using museum archives and stolen maps. They predicted soil conditions at future landing zones, identified which Normandy fields would support heavy vehicles after rain. While British command favored traditional reconnaissance, Americans used university networks recruiting scholars who had never held rifles. One professor, Dr. Elias Morgan, memorized medieval property maps to trace forgotten drainage ditches under French farmland. Those small trenches would later swallow German vehicles during counterattacks unseen beneath grass and wheat. Soldiers never knew his name, but many owed their lives to his strange scholarship behind enemy lines. A different war unfolded, one of signals, whispers, and invisible ink. American intelligence units, freshly created and often doubted by veteran British MI6 officers, began experimenting with unorthodox techniques. Spies disguised as journalists, missionaries, even circus performers, infiltrated neutral ports. They intercepted rumors, tracked fuel shipments, counted the cigarettes preferred by German officers, believing even addiction patterns could predict supply vulnerabilities. Psychologists studied captured letters from German soldiers, searching for linguistic signs of morale decay. They discovered that references to home decreased sharply before major offensives. This insight helped predict enemy operations, guiding Allied deployments with uncanny precision. The Office of Strategic Services, OSS, was the birthplace of American adaptation. It recruited actors for their ability to lie convincingly, criminals for their lockpicking skills, magicians to design illusions for escape kits. In a Washington basement, a team developed exploding coal, real anthracite shells filled with timed charges. These were secretly dumped into German locomotives, causing boilers to burst mid-journey. Trains derailed in remote valleys hundreds of miles from gunfire, yet the explosions echoed through supply chains like distant thunder. The Germans never understood how their steel arteries had been severed from within. While other light armies often adhered to lineage and tradition, Americans prized results above ritual. When jungle warfare in the Pacific revealed that standard infantry tactics failed, doctrines changed within weeks, not months. Uniforms were redesigned for humidity. Boots were resoled with local rubber. Flamethrower teams trained with mock pillboxes made from coconut trunks. A forgotten file from early 1943 recounts how a Marine platoon in Guadalcanal built makeshift periscope rifles using mirrors scavenged from wrecked bombers. With them, they cleared sniper nests without exposing their heads. Their invention spread quietly across the islands until it became standard practice. Uncredited but effective. Yet adaptation was not only physical, it was psychological, cultural, even emotional. Soldiers listened to swing music from portable gramophones in muddy trenches. It wasn't mere entertainment. Commanders noticed that rhythm improved morale, sharpened reaction times, made men less likely to freeze under fire. In Italy, a battalion marched into battle, humming Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, the tune echoing across ruined villages like a heartbeat refusing to stop. German POs later reported that the sound unnerved them. They expected grim silence from advancing troops, not music. This strange defiance to dance mentally in hell became a symbol of American unpredictability. Hidden beneath Europe's ashes lay another secret America learned by watching failure. The disastrous early raid on Kasserine Pass in North Africa nearly shattered confidence in American command. German Field Marshal Rommel cut through inexperienced U.S. troops like lightning. But instead of sinking into shame, senior officers dissected the catastrophe with brutal honesty. Command structures were overhauled overnight. Generals were replaced without ceremony. Training was intensified, incorporating lessons directly from the battlefield. Within months, those same American units that faltered at Kasserine would corner Rommel's forces in Tunisia. No other army in the war evolved so radically in such a short span. At night in muddy command tents, lit only by flickering lanterns, officers argued fiercely, sometimes violently, over strategy. There was no aristocratic calm. Ideas clashed like bayonets. A corporal could suggest a maneuver that a colonel might adopt if it promised survival. Rank mattered, yes, but ingenuity mattered more. War had become a test of imagination. Faint documents reveal how. American forces ran ghost operations, fake radio traffic designed to mislead German interceptors. Entire phantom divisions existed only in transmitted chatter. Inflatable tanks were deployed in English fields, convincing enemy spies of non-existent armored brigades. The deception culminated in Operation Fortitude, which tricked the Germans into expecting a landing at Pas-de-Calais instead of Normandy. The masterminds of the plan used Hollywood set designers to make fake camps look convincingly alive from reconnaissance aircraft. Trucks drove in circular routes for hours, stirring dust to mimic heavy traffic. The war was no longer fought only with bullets, but with illusions. Illusions America crafted with frightening creativity, deep in the Pacific. On islands where humidity clung like a second skin, small American squads worked with indigenous tribes whose languages no map acknowledged. Navajo code talkers transmitted messages the Japanese, never decoded. A language born from ancient desert songs, became a weapon stronger than steel. No other Allied army possessed anything like it. Adaptation meant reaching back centuries to find tools modern enemies could not comprehend. Meanwhile, scientists in hidden laboratories in New Mexico and Chicago played a different game. While generals planned offensives, physicists split atoms, knowing that if they succeeded, war itself would transform. Discussions unfolded in whispers behind locked doors. Could one weapon end the conflict quicker than armies ever could? It would later raise moral storms still raging today. But in that moment, it symbolized a terrifying truth. American innovation had no ceiling. When President Roosevelt authorized the Manhattan Project, he placed the future on an unpredictable path. Still, adaptation came with shadows. Soldiers who returned from battle could not speak of what they had seen. Not because of censorship alone, but because memories clung like ghosts. Those who fought in frozen forests at the Battle of the Bulge described hearing German troops whisper in perfect American English. Infiltrators trained in accent and slang. Paranoia spread through the lines. Passwords changed hourly. Men doubted even familiar faces. In that chaos, American soldiers learned to read subtle cues. Not just uniforms, how a man held his rifle, how he pronounced a single word like buddy. Adaptation became survival not only against bullets, but against deception. In abandoned French chateaus, interrogators questioned high-ranking German prisoners, offering cigarettes, coffee, and sometimes even jazz on gramophones. This humane treatment confused captured officers who expected cruelty. Many spoke freely, believing they had found unlikely respect. It was psychological warfare without violence, friendly faces unraveling steel-hard minds. One German engineer revealed V-2 missile production flaws over a single shared meal, information that saved thousands in London later. Kindness became a weapon no manual had described. By late 1944, America's war machine moved with frightening velocity. Factories ran day and night under glowing windows, women assembling aircraft faster than engineers could redesign them. Detroit built tanks while New Jersey forged Liberty ships at speeds that shocked naval observers. One vessel, the SS Robert E. Peary, was completed in just under 5 days, a record still spoken of like myth. Every ship, every tank was a lesson learned, improved, corrected. Mistakes were not shameful. They were opportunities for refinement. A mindset new to war. Some soldiers carried diaries now yellow with age, describing missions never acknowledged officially. In Belgium, a platoon discovered a secret German listening post, disguised inside a church tower. They approached disguised as local villagers, carrying coffins filled not with bodies, but radio equipment. The ruse worked. They tapped into enemy communications for 9 days, before exfiltrating unseen. Years later, records of the operation were found in a dusty crate marked miscellaneous. Such stories showcase adaptation in its purest, quietest form. One rarely discussed detail lies in medical files: America's rapid development of mobile surgical hospitals. Inspired partly by civilian emergency rooms and partly by brutal necessity, surgeons created field units that could stabilize wounded soldiers within an hour of injury. Survival rates soared. Men who would have died in trenches during World War I walked again. Portable blood storage, pioneered in U.S. labs, changed perceptions of battlefield mortality. Even suffering became another puzzle to solve. Toward war's end, as Allied forces breached Germany, American units discovered underground factories hidden inside mountains, guarded by fanatical SS troops. In one such complex, near Nordhausen, emaciated prisoners labored on advanced jets, the Me-262. American officers were stunned. The technology was far beyond anything they imagined. Instead of fearing it, they studied it, disassembled, captured engines, sent parts to engineers back home. Within months, American aviation leapt years forward. The war itself fed the engine of adaptation. Late nights in Berlin after surrender tell another hidden truth. While ruins smoked and survivors searched for bread, American intelligence raced against Soviet teams to capture scientists and documents. Operation Paperclip. Controversial and still debated. Transferred German researchers some brilliant, some morally stained into US programs. Their knowledge fueled rockets that would later reach the moon. This moral compromise, dark and unsettling, reveals adaptation with consequence. Victory is never clean. But what truly made Americans adapt fastest was something intangible, an uneasy awareness that they were newcomers to a brutal stage and could not afford pride. British command often relied on centuries of tradition. Soviet armies leaned on endurance forged in winter and hunger. America, by contrast, had no myth older than a century and a half. They improvised identity in real time. They questioned methods instead of worshiping them. They allowed innovation from bottom to top. A mechanic could propose a modification to a tank. A coder could rewrite protocols. A private could change small unit tactics. This fluidity frightened even allies who struggled to understand how a military could be both chaotic in personality and lethal in execution. One winter night, as snow fell softly on the Rhine, a small reconnaissance group crept across enemy lines, guided by a moon dimmed by smoke. They carried no heavy weapons, only maps, compasses, and a single radio wrapped in waxed cloth. Their objective was simple, but deadly: confirm the presence of a panzer division hidden somewhere in the Black Forest. They moved silently through ghostly trees, frost cracking beneath boots like distant gunshots. They found the tanks not through tracks or sound, but by the smell of diesel carried faintly on wind. Such sensory adaptation, using instinct alongside training, defined America's growth. When they reported coordinates, Allied bombers struck within hours, crippling the German capacity to counterattack during the final push. No statues honor the men of that mission. Their names faded with time, but their choices shifted history. When the war finally ended, when confetti rained on Times Square and strangers kissed beneath neon lights, few grasped how deeply America had been transformed. The adaptability born in war became a permanent feature of its military. Soldiers returned home with new skills, but carried invisible scars, memories replaying like broken film reels. Some woke at night believing artillery still thundered. Some could never again enjoy quiet because silence reminded them too much of ambush. The price of rapid adaptation was internal. Minds rewired for chaos struggled in peace. Historians often celebrate victories, but the darker truth is that America adapted quickly because it had to confront failure without denial, fear without paralysis, uncertainty without retreat. The shadow operations, code breakers, scientists, unsung mechanics, and sleepless engineers collectively formed an evolving organism, relentless in pursuit of advantage. While other alliances leaned on tradition, the United States embraced reinvention. It was a gamble that paid in victory, but left unresolved moral questions echoing through generations. In the end, the story of why American forces adapted faster than any other Allied army is not a tale of destiny or superiority. It is the story of a nation that respected logic more than legacy, a military that learned from errors rather than burying them, a people diverse enough to imagine solutions no single culture could birth alone. It is a reminder that wars are not only won by strength, but by flexibility, by minds willing to bend without breaking. Beneath every famous battle lies 1,000 forgotten evolutions. Hidden decisions made in darkness, small adjustments that together shifted the world. And perhaps that is the heaviest realization of all, that victory is built not on glory, but on restless doubt, constant questioning, and adaptation paid for in lives. As the last veterans fade from living memory, we are left with stories like scattered embers, glowing faintly in archives, diaries, whispered accounts. To understand them is to peel back the curtain on a war far more intricate than textbooks admit. America did not win because it was prepared. It won because it refused to stay the same. The war demanded transformation, and the United States, chaotic, inventive, flawed, transformed faster than anyone else dared. In that truth lies both triumph and tragedy. For adaptation is not free. It is paid in youth, in sleepless minds, in scientists who question morality, in soldiers who learned to kill and hoped to later live peacefully. The war ended, but the echoes remain. They remind us that beneath every medal lies a memory. Beneath every strategy lies a question. Beneath every victory lies a cost. The American forces adapted faster, yes, but the weight of that evolution still hangs in silence. Like the ghost of June 6, 1944, moving eternally across Normandy's cold morning waves,